thank you everybody for coming to this session. This is on beating burnout, and then there'll be a second talk on creating the career you love. And this is being taken by Sarah Goulding. Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, lovely to be here. Yeah, just a little bit about me and why I'm talking about both of those things. I'm a portfolio GP. At the latest count, I have 6 or 7 roles. And I have a passion for working well and how you manage that. I'm a GP training programme director in the West Midlands. I appraise GPs, I mentor them, and I also coach people in the healthcare sector around the areas of career development and well-being. So that's a little bit about me. And I just want you to really use this as an opportunity to take a breath, because sometimes in this very distracted world, we can try to multitask. These are the kind of talks that need your full attention, because it's brilliant that you're here listening to it, but if you're also trying to look on Instagram, text a friend, order something online, do your washing up, you're not going to get the most out of it. And how often is it that we actually spend time looking into our own well-being? So this is our time together. We're going to have time at the end to answer questions, and I will also put my contact details at the end if people want to contact me afterwards. But just a bit of evidence tells us that if we even have our phone near us, we are less productive and we don't concentrate as well. And I certainly know that to be true from my own experience. So, why am I here talking about burnout? Well, this rather emotive slide kind of was a picture of me about 3-4 years ago. I was a GP partner, and there were lots of different circumstances that were happening at the practice, but I didn't notice burnout creeping up on me. And I didn't notice until actually I left the practice, and I did it to get a better work-life balance. But I didn't realise that actually burnout was part of my reason for doing that until I left. And at that point, I was really quite unwell, and I needed to take 4 months off work and really do some work about thinking about what do I need, why has this happened, and not feel shame about that, and start to work out how to take better care of myself. And at the time, there was hardly anybody around having those conversations that I was aware of. And although I felt embarrassed about it, shameful, if only I'd been a better doctor or whatever, more efficient, that it wouldn't have happened to me. Actually, now I know that not to be true. And I'm really keen to just normalize having these conversations. So I'm going to be talking about what is burnout? What can it look like? And if we think, and how do we spot it in other people as well as ourselves? And how do we get help? And what does that help look like? Then once we've finished all of that, I'm going to talk about careers and how do we find a career that we love? How do we pay attention to those things that are important to us and interest us, and find areas where we can thrive? Because that's what I'm doing now, and I'm super passionate about it, and that's why I coach it and talk about it so much. So just a little opportunity for us to have a think about how we're feeling. You know, I've only really started doing these talks in the last year during the pandemic, and just a recognition, whether you're currently working in healthcare or not at the moment, that there are lots of elements of this that will affect us. You know, there might be some of us that have been shielding, spending time at home, and actually had quite a nice time of it, feel a little bit guilty perhaps. There might be people particularly in the people in more vulnerable groups who may feel that they have not been protected in the way. I know that a lot of people aren't keen on the BAME expression, but people in those communities who are not white and privileged, who actually feel rightfully, in my opinion, that you haven't been looked after in a way that you should have been. And that might be both scary in terms of future risk and very difficult in terms of emotions for what's been happening and lots of trauma. There's been a lot of testing and on again, off again, and I think there's some evidence that it takes us about 3 weeks to get used to a new situation. And when they're changing rules and regulations and numbers are changing more often than that, then no wonder we might feel constantly slightly on edge. There's also that element of washing our hands a lot and keeping clean and staying away from danger. And those of us that may have had pre-existing anxieties or obsessive compulsive tendencies, that can really have been a harder element. All those things can develop new. And then the whole vaccine chat. Who knew we'd be talking about what brand have you got? What does that mean? How did you react to it? What are the risks for you and your loved ones? And I think I just wanted to bring that up to recognise that there are lots of things that we might be feeling. And certainly I felt different almost from minute to minute over the last, 15 months or so. And that it really is okay to feel any of those feelings. And that if you're feeling those, chances are you're not alone. I think this has been a very unusual period of environmental and population times for us to have a lot of distress and disquiet. And that can affect us aside of how day-to-day is. So this is a bit of a quick info slide. This is relating to specifically just to doctors, just because there's good evidence on stats out there. And this was back in December. I'm sure it will be repeated again around now. But about 60% of people said they had depression, anxiety, stress or burnout relating to or worse from work. 31% said it was worse because of the pandemic, which shows you that it wasn't great to start with, which I think a lot of us already know. 42% did access wellbeing support, and ideally you'd want 60% of the people. So this is why it's important. And we know from other studies that nurses, paramedics, allied healthcare professionals have also been struggling. So just a little bit about numbers. So some of you may have come across this curve. It's called the Yerkes-Dodson curve, and it's about our performance related to the pressure we're under. So what we know is if we're not stressed and we're not given that much to do, the stuff we do isn't very interesting, it's not much of a process for our brain to go through, we might take it easy, we might be a bit lazy, we might be doing other stuff, a bit like how it can feel at the beginning of a job when you're not given much responsibility. And so actually our performance isn't that high. As that pressure goes up, we start doing more, the cogs are turning in our brain, and we can get up to that perfect point that we're aiming for at peak performance. And I think you can recognise times when you felt either at work or at home and you think, oh yeah, that was so satisfying. I got loads done. It really felt like I was flying. It wasn't hard, but it was quite exhilarating. And it was very satisfying, but it didn't take too much out of me. If that pressure keeps going, you can start dipping down the other side of performance. And if you don't notice that, or you're in a system where nothing changes, actually you can become so overwhelmed and so unwell that your performance drops right down. And so my aim is to get us to have a little think about where we currently are, or when you're having a bad day at work, where that might be. This is where I want you to put something in the chat box, please. And I'd like to hear where we're at, where most people are at. So, are you at 1, where you're not really struggling that much, but also might not be that fun? Are you at 2? Yeah, it's brilliant. And I'm very happy to receive decimal points, by the way, because people don't like pinning it down. Are you at 3, you're just tipping over the edge, or are you at 4 and really struggling? And there may be people watching today who are feeling like that. So what I'd like is a range of numbers in the chat box, either for you or for your team. Happy to get both. When you're at work at the moment or in your life generally, where are you at numbers wise? When I was in peak burnout, I did not know. And I don't think I was fully at 4, but I think I was definitely at sort of 3.75 or 3.5. I think right now I'm at a happy 2.
So we've got a
Yeah.
3.5.
Okay.
1.7.
Okay.
Random number.
Yeah, well, it's like a Likert scale, isn't it? It's okay to, because the whole idea is helping you assess where you are at and what that means. Have we got any more?
So that's 2 and 3. I think a range of sort of 1 to 2s and some 3s.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. And this can be quite a useful thing to have a look at if you're in a team, as a way of slightly depersonalizing it and making it okay to have these conversations. You know, what number do you think you're at? And normalizing that actually some people might be at a 3 or a 4, and that some people might be the other side. So just something to have a think about. And when you're at a 3 or a 4, what do you need to do? And that's what we're going to come on to. And this is a bit about what's going on in your brain when these things are going on. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically, when we're under stress, you know, our adrenaline goes up, our stress hormone, cortisol, peaks. And that's okay over a short period. You know, the people playing football later, the people on centre court at Wimbledon, that adrenaline might really help them focus and help them to block out other stuff that's going on. However, if that carries on over a long period, there are changes in our brain. You can find it on scans. And what happens is the area of our brain that makes decisions and deals with emotions, our prefrontal cortex at the front, gets smaller. And so that's why we struggle to make decisions and our emotional regulation isn't as good. If that keeps on going and keeps on going, our brain, the really primitive bit of our brain, the amygdala right at the center there, will get bigger because it's saying you're under threat. Therefore, I need to keep you on threat and look out for problems. So that's why when you've been under stress for a long time, you can perceive threats a lot more. Things that extra thing that somebody asks you to do can just make you snap or tip over or feel very emotional. So it's not just you're having a bad day or a run of bad days, your brain will have changed. And that's why it can take a long time to get better. But the good news is these things can be reversed. It's not irreversible, but it's to take it seriously. So what is burnout? I used to think it was just something when you were burning the candle at both ends, you were just a bit tired, and a good sleep would sort you out. But it isn't. The World Health Organization in 2019 has categorized it. And what they called it was a workplace-based condition related to chronic stress. And that if that stress is not relieved, you will develop burnout. And burnout is made up of 3 components. So it's physical, emotional, and mental capabilities. So that's where this pretty Venn diagram helps you understand it. So the top one is your body. And I'm not just talking about have a week off and you'll feel better. It's that exhaustion where you don't feel like doing even the fun stuff that you like to do. You don't even want to see your best friends or family. You haven't got the energy. And if you have time off, you're not adequately refreshed. You may find that actually, and it's quite common in medical situations and in other teams, that you can be a bit cynical, and sometimes that's fun, you know, having gallows humor, being a bit bleak, a bit I'm trying to think of the right words, but, you know, making jokes that are probably a bit inappropriate, that's good for team bonding. But if that then goes on to be how you genuinely feel all of the time, or you are struggling to feel compassionate, you know, this compassion fatigue towards other people and to yourself, then that's this emotional burnout. Then the pink bit, inefficacy. I used to find I struggled to process my blood test results. And, you know, I'd been a doctor for over 15 years at the time. Those weren't difficult things for me. I'd done them many times before. But my brain wasn't working properly and it wasn't letting me make those decisions. So you'll notice that actually things that were easy for you before suddenly feel like you're wading through treacle. So hopefully that helps you to understand it a bit better and know that it is a real characteristic. I would argue that it isn't just workplace based. I think there are people who are carers of people who have long-term illnesses or children with chronic disease. I think there are other situations in which people can have burnout personally. And also there is an overlap with things like anxiety and depression. There is a link with being on antidepressants, because obviously if you have one doesn't mean you can't have the other. You can have both, and both things are sadly common. So when we were allowed to sit around like this, and of course we are going to be soon, but a lot of us may choose to be wearing masks, the idea that how might you notice, and I think if I'd been meeting my team and seeing them, they might have noticed that actually I was a lot grumpier than usual, that I wasn't willing to take on the work that I normally would have done before. It's looking for changes in people. I'm a very chatty, sociable person, but if I become withdrawn and quiet, or suddenly really quite aggressive, then that will be different. Or somebody who's normally really easygoing suddenly becomes very snappy. It's looking out for those things. How do we have those conversations? Because I think it's very easy to have very superficial chats, you know, talking about the latest thing that's the thing to watch on Netflix, or talking about the weather, and not actually really having a proper conversation. So if you are talking to somebody, ask them twice, how are you really? And giving them time to show that you're listening. And the flip of that is if somebody asks you, tell them. You know, I think we need to normalize these conversations. We are not robots. We are physiological human beings. It would be abnormal to be perfectly happy and functioning well all of the time. So to be honest and go, actually, yeah, I'm doing okay today, but I was struggling a bit last week. I wasn't sleeping very well, or I've been really stressed about the easing of lockdown, or just not really enjoying work very much at the moment. Without necessarily expecting somebody to solve the problem, but just to kind of have that open conversation. Wanted to touch on moral injury. Because for people who are working in certain areas, this is going to be relevant for you at the moment. It was a term coined by people looking at the military, and it's related to this idea that we can be harmed ourselves by not providing the service that we would like to do. And that is certainly true for people in the healthcare sector at the moment. I think it will be true in lots of different areas of society at the moment, and that can have an effect on us. I do think as a GP that I struggled a bit because I was finding it frustrating dealing with complexity within an increasingly short period of time. There's going to be an element of this. And the advice in terms of dealing with it, again, is having conversations about it and acknowledging it. And when we come on to the creating a career you love, if this is a real lasting feature for you, have a consideration. Okay, are there areas that I might be happier in where this affects me less? Just a thought. One thing I want to bring up, in the healthcare sector, we're notoriously rubbish at being patients. And I think actually the whole NHS heroes hasn't done us any favours. I certainly didn't take any time off when I had whooping cough. I know people who stayed at work even after they heard of a bereavement. And there are consequences. You know, working when you're not well means that you are likely to stay until you are more unwell and then take longer to get better. We know that the risks of suicide and self-harm and actually car accidents are higher in medical professionals. We also know from high-profile media cases that if we make a mistake at work, we will still be held accountable for it, even if there are system errors or issues involved. And there's also an effect on our team. I know that when I was burning out, I was harder to work with, and it will have probably affected my colleagues at the time. It can affect the morale of the team. So it's important that if you are not well, and presenteeism is being at work when you're not well enough to be there, but feeling like you should. But actually, we can take that cape off and go, I'm a human, I need to look after myself. And that also sets a good standard for other people to do the same. So that's all sound a bit doom and gloomy, but I want us to just go, there are times where we may struggle. You're not alone in that, and that's okay. So what next? We've got some options. And it's all about showing ourselves the type of compassion that we might show other people. And that can feel like an uncomfortable concept, but we are worthy of it. Because if we look after ourselves, we can keep on going. If service is important to us, we're more likely to serve in a better and longer way if we look after this body of ours and this mind of ours and this heart of ours. I was talking a bit about looking out for threats, and I love this concept. And this is from Rachel Morris, whose podcast I'm going to mention later, who does this fantastic podcast called You Are Not a Frog. When gazelles are chased by a lion trying to eat them, they'll run away, and if they are lucky to survive, what gazelles do not then do is stay alert, looking out for a lion for the next month and not eating. What they don't do, this is an extrapolation, but a bit of poetic license, is think, oh my goodness, did you see the lion? Those big teeth, the manes, the claws, the paws. I better stay awake forever in case it comes again, reliving it and also pre-living the threat. And I don't know about you, but that's very common, you know, on a Sunday night before a Monday morning work day, going, oh, tomorrow's probably going to be really awful, and then this will happen, the pre-living of it. A gazelle is very much in the present. It goes, the threat is over, I'm just going to graze because that's what I need to do. And it's how to keep your mind in the present rather than living past difficult events or thinking about potential future ones. And that takes a bit of work. We're also living creatures that need to be fueled appropriately. If you know that you need 8 hours sleep a night to really be optimally filled up, and I'd really recommend Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, if you're interested in sleep and the science of it. What do you need to do 2 hours before bedtime if you need 8 hours sleep? What do you need to do 5 hours before? How can you set up your life to make that more likely? We know that eating the rainbow and eating pickled fermented foods mean that our gut bacteria are more likely to make us happy, and we are less likely to have anxiety and depression if we eat well. It's just a fact of science. We also know that green spaces and blue spaces, so water, sky, nature will increase our well-being. Even if you have a pretend plant pot on your desk, you have greater levels of well-being. And of course, we know about moving our body will keep us going as well. So it's about how can you maximize those things. So just having a think about, I've got a couple of things to offer. I'm not suggesting you have to do all of these things, and not everything is for everybody. It's just offering you up a little toolkit so that you can try out different things that might work for you. This is one that I absolutely adore, and it's called box breathing, and it's done by the Navy SEALs. So if it's good enough for them as they're about to go into difficult situations, it's good enough for us, right? So, and the idea is that it's helping us balance out our nervous systems. We are running on our what's called our sympathetic nervous system. When we're in stress, we're busy, our adrenaline, our cortisol, our fight or flight or freeze is going. And this helps us bring out the parasympathetic nervous system. And the idea is you do it 4 or 5 times in a row, and that just helps it settle down. I'm just going to talk it through one time. And what's good about it is that if you like a visual prompt, like you can do it around the edge of your computer screen, around a window, around your computer, around a book, it's quite useful to help you with the counting. So we start top left and we breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. And I always lower my shoulders and my voice drops an octave when I'm doing that. And I think it's when you do that, it's realised you're walking around with your shoulders around your ears. So see how you find that one. Takes a bit of practice. Next one is mindfulness, and the good evidence based behind this. And I'm going to show some apps that you might like and finding one that you like. And the idea is doing one of these body scans. All of these are bringing you back into the present, taking you out of your worried thoughts, and helping you stay more focused. And the idea is that you're either sit and know that you are sitting, or stand and know that you are standing. And this is something, again, you can do anywhere. And you do a whole body scan from the soles of your feet and feeling the gravity pushing down. And then you gradually work through all of your body. You know, if you're sitting, feeling the weight of your body pushing you down into the chair and going all the way up to the top of your head. And there are some really good guided meditations that can take you through that, and experimenting with what works for you. So, other thing that is evidence-based gratitude. Now that is, if you, at night time, before you go to bed, think about 3 things that you're grateful for that day. You're more likely to be well over the next 6 months. This is my mum and my son in a weed-infested field just after the first lockdown. Other ones, we know connecting with people help. That's at the top of the ways to well-being. If you are struggling, I want you to have a think about what would you tell your best friend to do? And if you would tell them to get help, then that's the next step, because don't try and doctor yourself. Now I love this picture. This is the idea that if you're a strong tree, even you can carry on thriving if you get a bit of support. If you're within the NHS, have a look at people.nhs.uk. There are tons of resources. If you're not in the NHS, you may have organisational things, or go and see your GP or have a chat with them. Podcasts, this is my range. You Are Not a Frog, Joyful Doctor are particularly good for medics. If you're not a medic yet, or like more general ones, How to Fail with Elizabeth Day and Slow Mo by Mo Gowda are fantastic. And these are my range of potential mindfulness apps. And it's finding one that you like. So if you don't like one, try another. You often get free month. So this is the end of my burnouty bit, and I want to leave enough time to talk about careers. Really okay if you're not all right. You need to preserve yourself to keep going. And that old thing, which is old but true, put your own oxygen mask on first. So this is a reminder to just take a breath in between talks. I'm not suggesting get up and have a coffee, but it just makes me laugh. So I'm going to move on to the careers one, because I'm a big fan of well-being can be intrinsically tied to your career journey. And I believe that we often think that there is a mountain peak that we have to get to. But quite a lot of people get there and think, oh, why did I choose this one? And is this it? And actually, I was much happier halfway up the mountain, or actually down in the valley felt really great, or I can see another peak. So it's just having a think about, as you go along, really assessing whether the choices that you are making actually meet your values, and that giving yourself permission to do that. And I'm going to talk through some top tips and myths about career change. And as I said, I'm very happy for people to contact me afterwards, and I'll put my details at the end. And I love Dr. Ronks, and some of you may have seen them in Operation Ouch. They are an A&E doctor who is a queer, non-binary doctor who talks often about representation. And they talk about that you cannot be what you do not see. And this is this concept of availability bias. And certainly when we go into medicine, we think probably there are about 7 different specialities, you know, medicine, surgery, peds, obs and gynae, GP, anaesthetics. That's probably about it. And when you're in training, those are the things you see, and you see people by default who have decided to stay in those specialities. And it's really important to think that that is not the only option. And actually what's great about conferences like this is to help you open your mind and see what's going on. What else is out there? I'm going to give you some tips about that, but do follow Dr. Ronks, because I think they're absolutely brilliant. They're on Twitter and Instagram. These are common career worries, and right at the centre of this is an unhelpful thinking bin. And I certainly felt this way when I left my partnership. I thought, oh, yeah, but the pinnacle is to be a partner. I've got to be that. And actually it wasn't right for me for lots of reasons. I felt that I needed to be perfect. Everybody else had this all sorted, that if I change or change my mind, people will judge me, or they'll think I'm not great, and that I had to stick to a path, and that everybody else had it sorted. So I want you to, if you're having thoughts like that, chuck them in this bin and allow yourself to have a bit more of thought. So I'm going to talk about some myths now. And one is that idea, there's only one way to do it, and that I have to get it right first time. That there's only one way of doing things, and that there's only one choice. Whereas in reality, so for example, this concept, okay, if I want to go into medicine, I can only have being a doctor as part of my portfolio. Whereas in reality, where does it say that? Who says that? There are people that are doing some really interesting things. I've got colleagues who are a hospital doctor part of the time and an artist a part of the time. There are people that do myriad different specialities, but also work as a pastor for their church. There are lots of different options. This concept that if you're not happy within your current path, that you have to chuck it all out or stay where you are. Whereas actually there might be some changes that you can make that would make you far more satisfied. And that's where things like working with a coach or talking to a colleague or a mentor might help you unpack what those things can be and what you do have control over. Because if you only focus on the stuff that you don't have control over, you're going to be miserable. This is me. at Alnwick Castle, hoping that my broomstick would magically take me flying because it was the Harry Potter castle. And this concept that if you have this job that you've always dreamed of, suddenly everything else will be perfect. And actually, it might be that you have a job that you love, but actually you neglect other bits of your life, or you have an unhappy relationship. It's part of your life. And this concept of, if you had two big circles, you know, these Venn diagrams, and one was big and one was small and inside it, which one for you would be life and which one would be work? Because I know for medics, quite often we strongly identify with work, and therefore work is the big circle and life just has to fit somewhere within it. Is that how you want it to be? The other concept, if we make changes, that's it. We can't change our minds. We can't go back. We can't pick up elements of what we were doing before. Is that actually true? It's not. So that helps you maybe take a bit of weight off decisions. So, some top tips from me as a career coach and somebody that has done a lot of different jobs. I've worked in different countries. I've tried a lot of different specialities within general practice, like menopause, family planning. I do medical education and support. I've worked abroad. I've done expedition medicine. What are my options? So, number one, get nosy. I'm always looking at the obituary section of the BMJ careers, because people have rarely had a linear life. They've rarely gone, I wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon and I did only that until I stopped. They've often done loads of interesting other things. So have a look online. That's where social media is so great. There's a good mix of people on LinkedIn, on Instagram, who are doing some quite fun things. Also, if you're interested, contact people. People love being asked about jobs that they do. You know, when you're allowed to, can I buy you a coffee and ask you some questions? How did you do this? Are there any people that you'd recommend I contacted? Plant yourself somewhere that you are going to thrive. If you think that you are a plant in a concrete path, you're never going to fully blossom and bloom. And you might have that gut feeling, and it's listening to that intuition. Where might you thrive? Who are the people that you like working with? What are the situations? If you like working through books, there's a really good one called What Colour is Your Parachute? That isn't based on medics, by Richard N. Bolles, and there's a model you can work through to help you think about where is the area that I might thrive. Or obviously, career coaches can help. So have a think about that. And my last tip is, we often go into jobs and think that we have to leave all the different bits of ourselves behind, but actually there might be bits of you that you're not using that actually would be fantastic. You know, people love languages, they love music, they love humour, or have a deep interest in history. Think about the bits of you that at school really you love doing, and see what that means in terms of jobs, because there may be elements that you can incorporate. The other bit, and this is me in China a long time ago, thinking I would cuddle and look after a red panda for free. Sadly, that has never happened. But are there moments where you've done something and you've just really felt fulfilled, exhilarated, interested? Listen to those little moments. It doesn't have to be a slog. So, I think I'm doing all right for time. These are my take homes, because this is you standing at a path. You do always have choices, and you're thinking about what do you have control over. Those choices can be individually yours. They don't have to be the same as other people. Wouldn't it be boring if we all did the same thing? You know, Aldous Huxley in his dystopian novel Brave New World talked about people being bred for certain functions in life. We're not like that. We're really diverse and heterogeneous. So it's okay to make different choices or change your mind or try stuff out and hold it lightly. And if that's not for you, that's okay. You can try something different. And really, and I think probably my most important one is thinking about what is important to you, both professionally and personally, because it doesn't have to be one or the other. And then what does that mean for my work life going forwards? So I know I've covered a lot of stuff there. I'm going to suggest that you write down for yourself, and very happy for you to put it in the chat if you'd like to commit to it, one action that you're going to take and one insight from anything that I've said today. What are you going to do and what thing have you noticed? And I'm going to stop sharing in a second so I can see the chat. But commit to something. These are my places for contacting me. I'm at Dr. Sarah Goulding, mainly on Instagram, but I'm also on LinkedIn as well. My website is drsarahgoulding.com, and that's my email. It's hello@drsarahgoulding.com. So very happy for you guys to contact me. So that's the lot of it. I'm going to have a look now and see. I'm going to stop sharing. Here we go. Right. So I can see that there's a question here, but do feel free. We've only got about a minute. If you've got any questions, and I can see there's one in the box. How do we cope with emotional and physical burnout, trying to overcome gaps in career as a doctor? As some of us graduate from different countries and looking for a job in another country, would it affect our practice once we've got our job? Okay. So I think that's in terms of, you know, if we take time off because we're not well, what's that going to show? Certainly in terms of just thinking about GMC, the GMC has as one of our core duties of a doctor is looking after ourselves, because if we are unwell and working, we're not going to look after our patients properly. And it's one of the key things that during your annual appraisal and revalidation, certainly in the UK, you're expected to show evidence of not being unwell. I think it's extremely valid and actually good practice to look after yourself. Because actually, the alternative is you don't, and you go off and you're off for longer, or you work and you're not functioning well and you're not the best version of yourself. So I would argue that it's absolutely crucial to take time off if you need to. And actually, I think if you were being interviewed, you can say, I took time off then because actually I wasn't well and I needed time to recover. Because if you think about it, anxiety and depression, 1 in 3 or 4 of us are going to have that at any one point. And we would never expect people to push on through with that if it was actually going to cause harm at work. So I hope that's answered your question.
Thank you, Sarah.
That's okay.
Also, another question on the sliders. Actually, there's two quite similar. It's about kind of the working environment and how the NHS sort of works from the goodwill of their staff, and that's not always fair. How can we kind of move away from that when that's sort of the way the hospital, the admin runs? Is there anything we can do to change that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think that's where I'm very keen to say this isn't one of those talks where I say if only we were more resilient, we wouldn't burn out. It's just not a fact. It's related to chronic workplace stress. And that's where systems change and government change is really key. And it's where being a member of a union that's going to represent your rights, it's where getting involved in representation to changes, it's where trying to be the change you want to see. How can you influence your team to be healthy and kind of look after each other? And there's a lot more to be said about stuff like that, actually. And that's where some of those podcasts are quite good. You know, being involved in medical leadership, being involved in medical education or journalism can help in terms of changing the environment we are working in. But I completely agree. We shouldn't have to feel like we're cannon fodder. And we shouldn't feel that we're there to be sacrificed. And it's where focusing on, it's coming back to that concept of focusing on what you do have influence over and what you can change. And I think it's also about having boundaries and sticking to them. You know, if you've got annual leave, take them. If you're letting work spill over into home time, trying to be a bit more clear on where your boundaries are about when you stay till, and encouraging other people in your team to do the same. But it's not an easy one. I do acknowledge that.
Thank you so much, Sarah. There's one more question.
Oh yes, from about the 4-day working week. Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, there's lots of evidence that we don't have to work more hours to be as productive. And actually, if we take breaks, we're more productive. I would love to think it would come into effect. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And how can we influence that? Yeah, certainly. And I know in France they've been talking about shorter working hours as well. So yeah, I think that would be wonderful to value the staff and retain the staff, and recruit more staff. It'd be lovely to see progressive changes like that. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm aware we've run over a little bit. So if people want to chat more, do get in touch with me. Very happy to, either here or on the other social media platforms.
Amazing. Yeah, that was really helpful, Sarah. I really enjoyed it as well.